Well, and unfortunately, the man that drew so much attention yesterday and actually only elevated John McCain's standing was a man who, as the Washington Post wrote some time ago, was a man who had 5 deferments from Vietnam, who said John McCain wasn't a war hero. And while John McCain was living there in those horrid conditions, being beaten up, being tortured, having bruises that would stay with him the rest of his life, Donald Trump was living the high life in Manhattan. Once told Howard Stern that avoiding STDs was his own Vietnam. And that man, President Trump, who has said he wants an elaborate multi-million-dollar parade down Pennsylvania Avenue to honor the military, he spent much of Monday resisting all calls to simply lower the White House flag in honor of prisoner of war and public servant Senator John McCain. As 18 senior administration officials independently paid tribute to John McCain's heroism and sacrifice, the president refused to budge. According to the New York Times, he ignored repeated requests from Vice President Pence, repeated requests from Chief of Staff John Kelly. At 3 events in the morning and early afternoon, Trump ignored requests for comments on the former POW and war hero.
Mr. President, do you have any thoughts on John McCain? Do you have any thoughts at all about John McCain? Do you believe John McCain was a hero, sir? Nothing at all about John McCain. Okay. Mr. President, the American Legion has asked you to lower the flags to half-staff. Any reaction to the American Legion? Any action to the American Legion asking you to put a proclamation about John McCain?
Go that way, John Carroll.
Why won't you say anything about John McCain?
Gene, the smallness is, of course, unrivaled, first of all. Secondly, I don't know what word to use. Stupidity? I don't know that you use stupidity against a man that ran through a field of 16 Republicans and then beat Hillary Clinton for president of the United States. Derangement? Well, too many words attached to derangement, too many meanings attached to derangement. But Donald Trump should have known what any other adult in Donald Trump's position there would have known, which is by doing what he did yesterday, he did nothing but elevate John McCain even more. McCain was laughing at the gates of St. Peter all day yesterday, or if he decided to take a detour and raise a little hell, he had Lucifer like winking at him going, "That's pretty good. You really set that sucker up." I mean, McCain had another day where we all got an opportunity to look at the greatness of his character compared to this clown who wouldn't even lower the flag to half-mast.
I think that maybe the phrase you were looking for was inadequacy as a human being. I mean, there are certain things that you would see and understand, that I might see and understand, that he doesn't, because of his enormous and overwhelming, this is President Trump, because of his enormous and overwhelming narcissism. In that first clip, when he was asked yesterday, the way he sat there with his arms crossed was just, you would expect better, really, of a 3-year-old. Maybe not a 2-year-old, but a 3-year-old. And it's some part of him stopped growing at about 2.5. The sort of me part. He's up He's at it again this morning, tweeting away in his own defense, I guess, not on the McCain matter, but in general. This is, John McCain. Whatever you thought of his politics, you could disagree with him. It was impossible not to find him funny and entertaining and just a delight to talk to and be around, and also, he had his clashes with President Trump. He saw who Trump was, but he did something about it. I mean, he spoke out. Right. He spoke out with his vote at a particularly crucial juncture in this country's recent history about the Affordable Care Act. And you wonder, is any of that sort of bravery left in the Republican Party?
You do wonder. And after yesterday, it was again. Where were the statements of support? Johnny Isakson certainly came out and said it, but the entire Republican Party should have come out. But again, the point is not that I am shocked by Donald Trump's behavior in that it shows him to be a cruel, callous bully. We've known that for a very long time. I'm shocked by how self-defeating it seems almost every action he takes is. How self-defeating, how he's harming himself, how he's elevating his opponents, how he does it so often in a way that no other adult, forget president, CEO, church leader, football coach, you name it, so self-defeating. So the president reportedly finally gave in after a stern public statement from the American Legion. The national commander said his 2 million members would strongly urge you to make an appropriate presidential proclamation. The White House soon lowered the flag to half-staff, and the president signed a proclamation, which begins, despite our differences on policy and politics, I respect Senator John McCain's service to our country. It goes on to ask the vice president to speak at McCain's ceremony with top advisors Kelly, Mattis, and Bolton to attend. And at a dinner with evangelical leaders last night, Trump read a brief appreciation.
Our hearts and prayers are going to the family of Senator John McCain. Going to be a lot of activity over the next number of days, and we very much appreciate everything that Senator McCain has done for our country. So thank you very much.
No, again, why does it take the man 12 hours, 14, while his staff is begging him to do the decent thing? Why did it take him so long? Why can't he get out of his own way?
Well, if reporting is correct, and as you said, the president is not stupid. He knows who his supporters are and where his support comes from. And when a significant veterans group like the American Legion puts some pressure on you, a man who really believes that veterans are on his side and who has veterans on his side, has budged. And that's good. But I do believe that the damage was done. A lot of what we saw yesterday was described as petty. It's really small. But I don't think it's especially petty. These two men were representatives of very significant fissures within the American politic, within the conservative politic. They were representatives of camps that believe in combat over some really fundamental issues like comportment, the power of persuasion versus being churlish, the nature of American immigration policy, whether cultural and racial homogeneity is preferable to heterogeneity, and perhaps most significantly of all, the nature of America's role in the world. John McCain was a very staunch advocate of an America that was extroverted, that had a very significant responsibility on its shoulders as the world's sole superpower, a very Reaganite vision that the maintenance of world peace can fall only on us alone. Donald Trump is representative of a very different vision for American politics. The fact that this combat continues beyond the grave is indicative of how powerful these issues are and how resonant they are in our politics. So we shouldn't dismiss this as petty. It is part of a very significant ongoing cultural battle for the future of the Republican Party and the Republic itself.
Patty Kay.
Well, hold on one second, though. I'm sorry, excuse me. But Noah, you didn't bring up abortion. You didn't bring up many ideological issues. I would guess that John McCain voted with the Republican Party 90% of the time. He voted for Trump's tax cuts. He voted against getting rid of the Affordable Care Act. But this was tribal at best. People hated John McCain. People that I knew hated in the Republican Party, hated and loathed John McCain through the years because he had friendships with Democrats, because he said nice things about Joe Biden, because he didn't call Barack Obama a Muslim in a disparaging way. I mean, this seems to me, if this is truly a fissure in the Republican Party, it's a fissure that takes the party down because, again, the word you use that seems most appropriate here is churlish. They hated McCain for not being churlish, for not being small, for not being the type of person who would mock and ridicule a man when he was dying of cancer.
Yeah, and Democrats might dismiss this, but within the conservative firmament, there is a debate over whether civility is a shackle imposed on Republicans and Republicans alone that hinders their ability to appeal to a broader demographic. It's a real debate. It's one I fall in the John McCain camp with. But there are others who say that civility is imposed on Republicans alone, and it is designed to keep them from making broader appeals, aggressive appeals, to not only their base, but to independent voters who want to see a fight. That is the camp that Donald Trump represents. And for conservatives, Donald Trump's very presidency is representative of how civility has hindered Republicans' abilities to win national office. Again, I don't agree with this, but this is a real debate in the Republican Party, and to dismiss it entirely is to cede the field, I think, to Donald Trump's camp. We do need to engage in it on terms that are sympathetic to them so that their arguments can be dismissed. Policy issues, I mean, I disagreed with John McCain on policy issues. For example, his appeal to his fixation on money in politics, I think, was wrong-headed, and the campaign finance law was deemed unconstitutional. I believe that that is not a philosophical issue. It's a policy issue. Big philosophical debates are what we're talking about here, and that's what we should focus on.
Well, and but Mike, we're also talking about basic human decency.
Oh, there you go.
I disagree. I disagreed with John McCain on many things. I think it was Patrick Ruffini who said I did not support McCain in 2 presidential elections because he was not ideologically conservative enough for me. That's how I felt during the primary process. I was more conservative than John McCain and didn't vote for him in 2 primary processes that he ran in. But at the same time, he was an American hero. And at some point, we put down our swords. At some point, as Patrick Ruffini said, in praising John McCain, he said something along the lines of, oh, for the luxury of assuming that a leader would be a good character and to being able to focus on ideology. But as Ruffini was suggesting, we've gotten to a point now where you can't make the assumption that the people we're voting for are good and decent people. And that is just, something is terribly lost.
Well, Joe, the interesting, at least to me, the truly interesting aspect of the discussion that you and Noah were just having is it's about inter-party splits, intra-party ideology, and ideology splits and differences between both parties. And yet when you take what happened with the president's, with Mr. Trump's treatment of John McCain's death and the whole thing about lowering the flag to half-staff, that separates itself from what we were just talking about. That's Caddy, I would submit that that's sort of a national thing that's beyond politics. I don't know about you, but I think a huge number of Americans know what it's like to go to a wake, to stand in line and pay their respects to the deceased. And that's not politics. And I don't know how inevitably someone will take a poll about to see whether people reacted to what Mr. Trump has done over the past few days with regard to Mr. McCain. But I think this is an element that is beyond politics that I suspect truly resonates among people.
Yeah, and Noah invokes the idea of civility and how conservatives feel that they have been shackled by civility. And I guess that's where we get into this discussion of political correctness and conservatives feeling that political correctness means that they can't really speak their minds. But I think there is something, as you suggest, Mike, common in the human experience in the way that we face death. And you can overcome differences and show your humanity and rise to the occasion and put differences aside you at critical moments. And that's what it means to be an adult. Adults have that ability to think, I have huge differences with this person, but in this particular moment, that's not what matters. I mean, actually, just think of the rivalry between John McCain and Barack Obama. They had huge differences of policy between them on the role of government, the size of government, on the issue of war and American military intervention around the world. The two men were philosophically and politically very divided. But John McCain found the moment at the Smith dinner just before the election, just before he lost to Barack Obama, to rise to the occasion and pay tribute to Barack Obama as a man. You can overcome policy differences and be an adult and be civil. I don't think that that means that you are being shackled by the constraints of political correctness. This isn't about politics and policy. It's about humanity.
Well, and also, Heidi, what a joke for Republicans to suggest that they've been forced to play by Marcus of Queensberry rules for the past 40 years, but it's just the big bad Democrats who've played tough. I'm sure John McCain's family, looking back to how he was treated in the 2000 primary, would think differently. I mean, the party of, you can just go back and look at what's happened in South Carolina politics. It seems year in, year out in Republican primaries. Republicans have not been shackled by being too kind and being too civil. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And if you talk to Democrats, they will tell you that they're the ones who unfortunately play too politely. I mean, it's nonsense from both sides.
Ask Mike Dukakis how civil and kind they were with the Willie Horton ad, or ask John McCain how civil or kind it was to make up a story about one of his adopted children being an illegitimate out-of-wedlock child that really hurt him in South Carolina. So I think we could have a long discussion about that. But I wanted to go back to the previous point, which is that Donald Trump's problems with McCain are not ideological, because Donald Trump is not ideological. They were personal. And to Katty's point, yes, this does speak to the basic ability of a grown adult human being to be able to put aside those feelings, those personal feelings of what Governor Cuomo called effectively just jealousy of Senator McCain, and to rise to the occasion and understand that that flag that flies above the White House is not his flag. And in fact, that house is not his house. It's the people's house. And to not be able to see through that and understand that he represents something greater, and that this is not about his personal vendetta and fight with Senator McCain, is something that will be remembered, even though ultimately he was forced to lower the flag again. That is the imagery, Joe, that will be replayed whenever Donald Trump decides to return to his narrative about Democrats or whoever his enemy is disrespecting veterans. This was an act of great disrespect to a war hero, not just a veteran, but a national treasure and war hero.
And again, the smallness was self-defeating. It did not hurt John McCain. In fact, it only elevated his status and made all of America realize just what we lost. Still ahead on Morning Joe, we're going to be breaking down the proposed revisions to NAFTA, which the president announced in a translated conference call with the president of Mexico, or as MSNBC's Ali Velshi put it, when the call was over,
We had simultaneous translation from the Spanish to English for the Mexican president. Unfortunately, we didn't have simultaneous translation for the English to English because the president made not a whole lot of sense there.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.